Xiao Yushi stared fixedly at Yang Yi, and there was a sheathed saber in her grasp. Yang Yi gazed at her in silence. They just gazed at each other for a while before Xiao Yushi spoke solemnly. "Who are you?" Yang Yi replied, "You're my wife, so who do you think I am? Do you want to die?" Xiao Yushi's eyes narrowed slightly. Yang Yi took a deep breath, walked over to Xiao Yushi, and said, "Do you remember the past?" She gazed at him for a long time and said, "I don't." A wisp of pain flashed through Yang Ye's eyes. "Something definitely happened to you. Yushi, I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have let you leave that day." Swish! Xiao Yushi's saber suddenly left its sheath, and then a saber was pressed against Yang Ye's throat. She gazed coldly at him and said, "Let me repeat it again. I don't know you." Yang Yi looked her straight in the eyes. "Then tell me why I know all those secrets about you." Xiao Yushi's eyes had killing intent in them. "That's exactly what I want to know. Since you don't remember the past, then allow me to tell you. You were my wife." As soon as Yang Yi finished speaking, Xiao Yushi suddenly swung her saber. Clang! Yang Yi took a few steps back, and there was a red mark on his throat. A wisp of shock flashed through her eyes when she saw that her saber hadn't been able to pierce through Yang Ye's skin. Obviously, she hadn't expected his physical defenses to actually be that strong. Yang Yi touched the red mark on his throat and said, "I never imagined that you would try to kill me one day, but I don't blame you. Don't worry. I'll help you recover your memories. I'm afraid you won't have the chance to do that." Suddenly, a voice resounded. Yang Yi recognized that voice because it belonged to that elder from before, Lin Yueyin. Yang Yi walked out of the room. Lin Yueyin was looking coldly at him, and there were 3 other women by her side. Lin Yueyin spoke coldly, "Your boldness exceeds my expectations. I never expected you to chase us all the way here." Yang Yi said, "Can we talk properly? Are you even worthy?" Lin Yueyin spoke with disdain. "Let me tell you that someone is already pursuing Yushi, and that's Mo Yuntian. Do you know who Mo Yuntian is? He's a peerless genius who's ranked at the 35th position on the martial rankings. What about you? Who do you think you are? What right do you have to pursue Yushi? Can you know your own limitations?" Yang Yi replied, "I'm very happy that you're so protective of her. But this is between us, so can you let us deal with it ourselves? Yushi's business is my 1,000 crane sect's business." Lin Yueyin spoke coldly. "She'll belong to Mo Yuntian soon. No one can change that." Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't really like hearing what you just said." "So what?" Lin Yueyin spoke with disdain. "A mere half-saint like you. Elder Lin." Suddenly, Xiao Yushi interrupted Lin Yueyin and said, "This is between us. Let us deal with it ourselves." Yang Yi glanced at Xiao Yushi, and then he slowly relaxed his hand. "Yushi." Lin Yueyin's face fell. "I don't know who he is, and I don't want to know. All I want to tell you is that the union between you and Mo Yuntian isn't just related to you, it's related to our 1,000 crane sect as well. Besides that, young Master Mo is passionate about you. So wouldn't he be hurt if he finds out that you were with another man?" "He would be hurt?" Yang Yi chuckled. "What the fuck does this have to do with him? I don't know where you're getting such confidence from to speak so arrogantly." Lin Yueyin gazed at Yang Yi and said, "But you must realize that you're weaker than an ant when compared to him." Meanwhile, Lin Yueyin suddenly gazed at Lin Yueyin. "Elder Lin, I told you that this is between us. Do I not have the right to deal with my own personal matters?" Lin Yueyin glanced at her and grunted coldly. "I hope you have some self-respect." She glanced coldly at Yang Yi before leading the 3 women away with her. Once Lin Yueyin left, Yang Yi gazed at Xiao Yushi and said, "If it were in the past, you would have swung your saber at her for speaking like that to me." Xiao Yushi said, "I really don't recognize you. That's because you lose your memories." Yang Yi continued, "Once I'm done here at White Deer Academy, I'll find a way to recover your memories. Besides that, you don't seem to be being treated well in that 1,000 crane sect." Xiao Yushi replied, "That's my own business." Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was in front of her when he appeared again. Xiao Yushi was about to retaliate when Yang Ye's hands suddenly pressed down on her shoulders. In an instant, she was unable to move a muscle. Yang Yi gazed at her and said, "Yushi, remember that your business is my business. I know that it's pointless to say this to you. However, you must remember that I'll always be there for you." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi released her and vanished on the spot. After he left Incense Pavilion, Yang Yi hadn't even gone far when a figure suddenly obstructed his path. It was none other than Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan spoke coldly. "I should have killed you in Sky Capital City." Yang Yi glanced at her, paid no attention to her, and walked around her. Meanwhile, her figure obstructed his path again. "Don't." Her voice stopped abruptly because Yang Yi suddenly appeared in front of her. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly, and she was just about to attack. However, a terrifying wave of intent suddenly pressed down upon her, causing her figure to stiffen momentarily, and it was exactly that moment which allowed a palm to strike her right cheek. Slap! A resounding slap resounded through the silent night sky. Lin Yuan was blasted flying again, and her figure finally stopped after flying almost 1 kilometer away. But she'd only just stopped when Yang Yi suddenly appeared in front of her again. This time, she wasn't stunned as she had been, and she swiftly slapped her palm at Yang Yi when he appeared in front of her. Yang Yi didn't dodge it and allowed her palm to strike his chest. Bang! Her palm instantly shook upon striking Yang Yi's chest, but Yang Yi didn't move at all. Lin Yuan was astounded. Even though she'd attacked in a hurry and hadn't been able to use her full strength, it wasn't weak to the extent of causing no harm. Is this fellow a dragon? Meanwhile, at the instant that she was stunned, Yang Yi raised his hand and slapped her again. Pooh! A mouthful of blood sprayed from her mouth as her figure was blasted flying again. In the end, she crashed heavily against the ground. She was just about to stand up when Yang Yi appeared in front of her again, and then he stomped her stomach, causing another mouthful of blood to spray from her mouth. Lin Yuan gazed at Yang Yi with astonishment. A saint like me is actually being crushed by a half-saint? Yang Yi looked down at Lin Yuan, and then he raised his right hand again. Lin Yuan's expression changed, and she instinctively moved her head to the side. However, after waiting for a short while, Yang Yi's palm still hadn't struck her at all. A short while passed before she turned her head again to look at Yang Yi, and she spoke furiously. "How dare you play tricks on me?" Slap! Yang Yi slapped her again. "You say I'm playing tricks on you if I don't hit you. Since it's like that, then I have no choice but to slap you so that you don't say I'm playing tricks on you." Pooh! Another mouthful of blood sprayed out from her mouth. No one knew if it was because of her injury or anger. Yang Yi looked down at her and said, "I wanted to talk properly with you, but you seem to be unwilling. So, can we talk properly now?" Lin Yuan stared fixedly at Yang Yi in silence. "Can we?" Yang Yi suddenly howled furiously. Lin Yuan's delicate figure trembled as she gazed at the ferocious expression on Yang Yi's face, and she instinctively nodded. "Isn't that better?" Yang Yi continued. "I intended to speak nicely to you, but you just had to refuse and force me to use such methods against you. Alright, it's fine so long as you like it. Now, let me ask you a few questions. I hope you'll answer them truthfully. If you dare to lie to me, then I'll tear off your clothes and hang you outside the city gates. Right, I'll keep you alive, but you might want to die by then." Lin Yuan's expression changed drastically, and there was terror in her eyes. Yang Yi asked, "How did Xiao Yushi get to Thousand Crane Sect?" Lin Yuan hesitated for a moment before she said, "It was Martial Ant Ding Lin who brought her. As for everything else, I know nothing." Yang Yi asked, "Why has she lost her memories?" Lin Yuan shook her head. "Martial Ant Ding Lin should know the reason. You can ask her." Yang Yi fell silent. He knew that Lin Yuan was probably not lying, and she didn't dare to do so as well. Ding Lin? Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. "I have no choice but to look for her if I want to find out why Yushi has lost her memories." Yang Yi lowered his head to gaze at Lin Yuan again. "In the future, let Yushi deal with her own business, and don't be a busybody anymore. Understand?" She just gazed silently at him. Did you hear me? Yang Ye's voice grew slightly louder, and Lin Yuan hurriedly nodded. Yang Yi slapped Lin Yuan's swollen face lightly, and then he turned around and looked towards the side. I'll give you face. As he spoke, Yang Yi released Lin Yuan and left. Xiao Yushi would definitely be put in a bad situation if he killed Lin Yuan. The important matter at hand for him was to deal with the matters at White Deer Academy. Once Yang Yi left, Xiao Yushi appeared in front of Lin Yuan, and she glanced at Lin Yuan before turning around and leaving. Lin Yuan stretched out her hand to touch her swollen face, and she had a furious expression on her face while resentment filled her eyes. No matter who you are, I'll definitely. Suddenly, Yang Yi appeared in front of her, and he gazed at her and said, You'll definitely what? Lin Yuan was at a loss for words. Lin Yuan's face was absolutely unsightly right now. Meanwhile, Xiao Yushi, who was about to leave, had stopped, and she turned around to look at Yang Yi. Yang Yi stretched out his hand to lightly slap Lin Yuan's left cheek, which was still normal, and he smiled. Actually, it's very normal for you to want to take revenge on me. Even I would do the same. Don't act like that. People might think that I'm bullying you. At this moment, Lin Yuan's delicate figure was trembling slightly while her face was pale, coupled with her swollen right cheek. She really seemed absolutely pitiable. Yang Yi gazed at Lin Yuan and shook his head. In the past, saints were so high and mighty to me, but once I gained sufficient strength, I noticed that they are no different from ordinary people. They have emotions and fear death. Yang Yi turned around to look at Xiao Yushi at this point. Will you be affected by her death? I will. Xiao Yushi answered without the slightest hesitation. If it was in the past, you would have said no. Yang Yi turned around and walked away once he finished speaking. But he stopped once more after just taking 2 steps forward, and then he turned around to gaze at Lin Yuan. If I find out that you interfered in her freedom again, then I'll definitely strip you and hang you on the city walls. Right, you'll be alive. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi glanced at the sky while a slight smile arose on the corners of his mouth, and then he vanished beneath the veil of night. Who is he? Lin Yuan gazed at Xiao Yushi once Yang Yi left. She was no fool. Someone who could render her completely helpless while only at the half-saint realm was absolutely not an ordinary person. I don't know him. Xiao Yushi glanced at Lin Yuan and said, It's best if you don't offend him, because I think that he wasn't joking just now. Xiao Yushi left once she finished speaking. Lin Yuan clenched her fist as she stood there, and then she closed her eyes slightly. No one knew what she was thinking. Immortal Cloud Residence. Actually, if it was possible, he wanted to just kill Lin Yuan, because he didn't even have to think about it to know that she would definitely take revenge in the future. However, Xiao Yushi would definitely be in trouble if he killed Lin Yuan. After all, Lin Yuan wasn't the only one who'd seen him with Xiao Yushi, and White Deer Academy wouldn't let him kill her either. He hadn't concealed his aura earlier, and he'd noticed that someone was watching him, but he paid no attention to that person because that person held no ill intent towards him. However, he knew that person would have definitely interfered if he tried to kill Lin Yuan. After all, it was White Deer Academy's territory, so where would it put its face if a member of the Thousand Crane sect died here? Of course, if he really intended to kill Lin Yuan under such circumstances, then even the experts of White Deer Academy would have definitely been unable to stop him. However, was it necessary? That expert who was hiding in the shadows held no ill intent towards him, so it was clearly a member of the scholarly faction. It would truly be quite foolish to get in the scholarly faction's bad books for Lin Yuan. After all, in Yang Ye's opinion, killing Lin Yuan was something he could do any time. Yang Yi sat cross-legged on his bed, breathed in lightly, and then closed his eyes and recalled everything which had occurred today. The outer court instructor he fought with in Nanjing today was a saint, a high-rank saint, and that gray-robed old man from Cloud Merchant Group was a high-rank saint as well. But the gap between their strengths was like the distance between the heavens and the earth. What did that prove? It proved that realms of cultivation weren't the only standard to judge a person's strength by. The simplest example was in Nanjing and himself. They were only high-rank half-saints, but their strengths weren't even the slightest bit weaker to high-rank saints. Why? There were many reasons like combat techniques, intent, combat instinct, strength of the physical body, and various other factors. To put it in simpler terms, a person's strength couldn't be judged solely by the person's cultivation, it had to be judged based on every other aspect. This made him constantly remember to never underestimate someone at a lower realm of cultivation, just like Nether Maiden. She'd been an entire realm of cultivation lower than him at that time, yet her strength wasn't weaker to him at all. There was absolutely no lack of such geniuses in the Central Divine Prefecture. But he'd just never encountered them yet. However, he knew that he would be encountering them soon. Xianxia remained silent on the bed for a long time, and then a golden fruit appeared in his grasp. It was an adamantium fruit. While he was in that world filled with savages, Xianxia remembered how Shui Wenyang had said that the adamantium fruits were extremely beneficial to demon beasts but harmful to humans, because the physical bodies of humans couldn't endure the energy within adamantium fruits. Forcefully consuming them would be equivalent to exhausting the potential of the body, and even someone who possessed the physical body of a saint would definitely be unable to live for long after consuming it. He hesitated for a moment before swallowing it. His body wasn't inferior to a demon beast, so the side effects of the adamantium fruit probably didn't apply to him. The reason he'd thought of the adamantium fruits was mainly because the backlash from absorbing stellar energy wasn't very effective at improving his body any longer. His body was clearly extremely important to him, because regardless of whether it was the Brink Laws or Heavenrend, they required a strong body. If he didn't possess his physical strength, then his overall strength would definitely drop by a few levels. So he decided to try consuming the adamantium fruits. After all, he had over 100 of them. As soon as he swallowed it, Xianxia immediately felt like a ball of flames had appeared within him, and his entire body was hot. However, there wasn't any other effect besides that. It doesn't work? Xianxia frowned. Suddenly, his eyes opened wide because blazing flames had actually arisen from him. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that he felt like his meridians and bones were burning. It felt exactly like how it was when he used the nether ghost flame to temper his body all those years ago. The difference was that the flames were much more terrifying than the nether ghost flame. However, it still wasn't as painful as the backlash from absorbing stellar energy. Xianxia gradually noticed that his body, meridians, and even bones seemed to be undergoing a transformation. Xianxia was overjoyed by this discovery, because it proved that the adamantium fruit worked on him. However, only around an hour had passed before the flames on him had gradually dispersed, and the feeling of undergoing a transformation gradually vanished as well. Xianxia frowned, and then he pondered deeply for a brief moment before swallowing another fruit. Just like that, whenever the effects of the previous fruit vanished, Xianxia would immediately swallow another. In the blink of an eye, dawn had arrived, but he didn't stop there and continued his consumption of adamantium fruits. Meanwhile, his clothes had vanished, and his bare skin actually seemed like it was slowly shedding. If a Nanjing and the others were here, they would definitely be flabbergasted, because how terrifying was Xianxia's physical body. After all, even a saint with a high-grade divine rank blade might not be able to slice off his skin. After around 6 hours passed, the skin on Xianxia's upper body had fallen off, and it was replaced by a thin layer of light yellow skin. Time passed slowly. The skin on Xianxia's lower body started to fall off, and he still hadn't stopped consuming the adamantium fruits. In over a day of time, he'd consumed over 50 of them. If anyone else were to find out that he was eating adamantium fruits like this, and especially if it were the demon beasts, they would definitely kill him, because adamantium fruits weren't supposed to be used like that. In the hall, and Nanjing sat on a chair with her eyes closed. Xiwu Shun was pacing up and down incessantly before her, and his face was covered in worry and anxiety. A short while passed before he gazed at a Nanjing and said, "It's only an hour away from dawn. What exactly is that fellow doing? Something better not have happened to him at a time like this. Otherwise we would really lose face." And Nanjing opened her eyes and glanced at Xiwu Shin. "He's cultivating." Cultivating? Xiwu Shin smacked himself on the forehead. Cultivating at a time like this? At a time like this? Does he realize what we have to do today? We have to fight those fellows from the law faction. Lots of people are going to be watching. We aren't just representing Ocean of Clouds Academy. We're representing Pine Prefecture as well. If we lose face this time, then no one from Pine Prefecture will ever be able to hold their head up high in the other prefectures. And Nanjing said, "Aren't you and I there to deal with it?" "Aye." The corners of Xu Wushen's mouth twitched, and a short while passed before he laughed bitterly. "Can you ask that fellow to stop cultivating for now?" Meanwhile, Fang Yun walked into the hall. He glanced at a Nanjing and Xu Wushen before he said, "Where's Yang Yi?" Xu Wushen replied, "He's cultivating." Fang Yun frowned. "Everyone is waiting for all of you now." And Nanjing pondered deeply for a moment, and then she turned around and went up the stairs. It didn't take long for her to arrive at Yang Ye's room. At this moment, the skin on Yang Ye's lower body was still shedding, and only the skin on his feet hadn't fallen off completely. She gazed at Yang Yi for quite a while before she turned around and left. It didn't take long for her to return to the hall. Xu Wushen asked, "Where's Yang Yi?" And Nanjing flipped her palm, and Sky Split appeared in her grasp before she started walking towards the exit. Xu Wushen was stunned, and then he hurriedly asked, "Where are you going?" And Nanjing replied, "White Deer Academy." Xu Wushen's face fell, and then he obstructed in Nanjing and said, "You're going yourself? What about Yang Yi? He'll be there soon." As soon as she finished speaking, she walked around him and continued towards the exit. Xu Wushen hesitated for quite some time on the spot, and then he took a deep breath and followed in Nanjing. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly stopped and looked at him. "Don't come with me." Xu Wushen replied, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid that you'll be a burden." And Nanjing's figure vanished on the spot once she finished speaking. Xu Wushen was speechless. White Deer Academy. It was situated at the top of a towering mountain. If one looked up from the foot of the mountain, one could faintly see some building hidden between the clouds and mist. At the borders of the peak was countless pillars of water that surged down from above like the Milky Way raining down from outer space. It was an absolutely magnificent scene. Besides that, there was a practically completely straight stairway at the center of the mountain, and it stretched for around 100 kilometers from the bottom to the top. "That's Ascension Stairway." Fang Yun, who stood by in Nanjing's at the foot of the mountain, said, "That's the final barrier, and the final test our White Deer Academy placed for the residents of White Deer Dimension. Ascend that stairway and you'll ascend to the sky. Right, you can't rely on any treasures or profound energy. Of course, you wouldn't be able to anyway, because there's a formation on it, and it'll suppress your profound energy. It's a test of willpower. The path of cultivation is without end, so if one lacks willpower, then how could one become an expert? It's much worse than the tests of my endless devil sect." Xu Wushen spoke with a solemn expression on his face. Not to mention that the stone stairway was long, it was practically straight, and one couldn't even utilize profound energy to ascend it. So, how could it not be terrifying? The worst was the inability to utilize profound energy. In other words, one would definitely die if one fell on the way up. Fang Yun said, "It shouldn't be difficult for the both of you, right?" Xu Wushen puckered his lips and squeezed out a smile. It should not be too much of a problem." Fang Yun nodded. "If even you think it isn't a problem, then it shouldn't be a problem for Missen at all." Xu Wushen's face darkened, and he glared at Fang Yun. "Brother Fan, you'll have no friends if you speak like that." "I was joking." Fang Yun smiled, and then he spoke seriously. "Someone in my academy once used less than 100 breaths of time to ascend this stairway. That's the best result in the history of my academy." 100 breaths of time. Xu Wushen's eyes opened wide. Are you joking?" There was a trace of shock in Nanjing's eyes as well. 100 breaths of time. What did that mean? It meant that he traversed the stairway like he was traversing flat ground. Fang Yun glanced at Xu Wushen and said, "Do you think I have a reason to joke with you?" Xu Wushen revealed a solemn expression on his face. Was he from the scholarly faction or the law faction? "The scholarly faction," replied Fang Yun. Xu Wushen immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Fang Yun added, the second ranked used 109 breaths of time, and he's from the law faction. I should mention that he's also the #1 expert in the law faction's younger generation. Perhaps all of you might meet him later. Of course, the precondition is that you're sufficiently strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't pay any attention to all of you. Xu Wuxin's face stiffened. He was about to speak when a Nanjing had started walking towards the stairway. Fang Yun seemed to become serious when she walked over. As soon as a Nanjing stepped on the first step, the stone stairway seemed as if it had come to life, and it shook slightly before the character appeared in the sky. It has begun. Fang Yun slowly clenched his fists. At the top of the mountain, there was a huge square before a pavilion, and an enormous arena was situated at the center of that square. On a stone platform behind the arena was two groups of people who were dressed differently. The group on the left wore moon-white robes, and the group on the right wore gray robes. Besides that, the guests which the law faction had invited to watch the competition were seated on the stone platform to the right of the arena. When the character appeared in the sky, one of them suddenly said, "Someone is ascending the stairs." Everyone's gazes instantly shot towards the stairway. A black-robed old man on the guest platform suddenly looked at the old man in linen robes seated by his side. "I never expected that your martial sect would have actually come. I truly didn't expect this," the old man in linen robes said. "I never expected that your devil path would be here as well." The black-robed old man glanced at the platform with all the members of White Deer Academy and said, "The competition is just a smokescreen. Their internal strife is probably their true motive." Ha! White Deer Academy was so prominent while Xiao Wuqing was still here. At that time, not to mention your martial sect and my devil path, even the Nether Pavilion and the evil faction had to give them face. Yet now, TSK. The old man in linen robes said, "There's no thriving without experiencing decline." The black-robed old man chuckled. "Let's forget about that. In any case, we won't lose anything, and it would even be beneficial to us." The old man in linen robes nodded. The black-robed old man spoke abruptly. "Right? I heard that fellow, Xianxia, from Ocean of Clouds Academy is dead. And it's a fellow called Yang Yi who has come this time?" The old man in linen robes nodded lightly. "I met them on my way here. Only 3 of them came this time. Are they here to give their lives away?" The black-robed old man shook his head. "It's an absolute waste of time. The law faction and scholarly faction should just have their showdown." The old man in linen robes replied, "Those 3 little fellows aren't as weak as you think." "Oh!" A trace of interest appeared in the black-robed old man's eyes. "You, Wu Yuan, rarely think highly of anyone. Is there an innate saint amongst them?" "No, there isn't." The old man in linen robes continued, "I don't know what their true strengths are like, but based on the battle they had, they are extraordinary indeed, especially that little girl with the spear. Unfortunately, I stopped them that day, so I wasn't able to witness her true strength. Now I'm quite interested." The black-robed old man said, "Why don't we make a bet?" "On what?" The linen-robed old man glanced at the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man replied, 50 breaths of time have passed. I bet that the person ascending the stairs will take at least 300 breaths of time. It'll be my win if it takes more than 300 breaths of time, and it's your win if it's below 300 breaths of time. All right? The linen-robed old man asked, "What are we betting with?" 1,000 violet crystals. Do you dare or not? The black-robed old man chuckled slyly. After all, one could be considered an outstanding genius by taking 300 breaths of time. He didn't think that such a genius existed in Pine Prefecture. Wu Yuan glanced at the sky, and he noticed that 90 breaths of time had passed now. He pondered deeply for a few breaths of time and said, "It's a deal. All right. Ha ha ha." Suddenly, the black-robed old man's voice stopped abruptly because the numbers in the sky had stopped. At the same time, a woman appeared at the edge of the stairway. 100 breaths of time. 100 breaths of time. The expressions of everyone here had changed, and it even included the 2 old men who led the groups from the law faction and scholarly faction. Everyone gazed at the spear-wielding woman in the distance with disbelief in their eyes. The black-robed old man's face had stiffened, and his eyes were filled with shock. Meanwhile, the linen-robed old man had stood up, and his eyes were filled with shock as well. 100 breaths of time. What did that represent? The best result throughout the history of White Deer Academy was 100 breaths of time, yet she'd actually tied with the best result in the history of White Deer Academy. Meanwhile, the number in the sky returned to 0 and started moving again. Someone else was ascending the stairway. Everyone simultaneously gazed at the stairway. At this moment, absolute silence filled the surroundings. Han Yu, wanna bet again? Wu Yuan suddenly gazed at the black-robed old man. The corners of Han Yu's mouth twitched, and then he glanced at a Nanjing before waving his right hand. A spatial ring appeared in front of Wu Yuan. I accept my loss. Wu Yuan chuckled as he took the spatial ring, and then he said, Want to continue? Han Yun grunted coldly and remained silent. Wu Yuan smiled, and then he gazed at the stairway while the interest in his eyes grew stronger. It didn't take long for the timer to arrive at 100 breaths of time, but no one appeared at the top of the stairway. The members of White Deer Academy instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this, especially the members of the Law faction. After all, if everyone could tie with the best results of White Deer Academy, then it would be a slap to their faces. Because besides Shang Yunxi's betrayal, the reason they wanted to destroy Ocean of Clouds Academy was because its existence was an insult to White Deer Academy. Shang Yunxi had constantly led the students of Ocean of Clouds Academy to compete at White Deer Academy to prove that the geniuses from his academy weren't inferior to White Deer Academy. If everyone from Ocean of Clouds Academy could break the record, then where would they put their faces? Or it should be said that they were already on the verge of having nowhere to put their faces. The best result in the history of the Law faction had been 109 breaths of time, but this woman before them had succeeded in 100 breaths of time. Many people amongst the group from the Law faction had gloomy expressions on their faces. Conversely, the members of the scholarly faction gazed at a Nanjing with warm gazes and smiles on their faces. As far as they were concerned, Shang Yunxi was from the scholarly faction, so a Nanjing was actually from their scholarly faction as well. 200 breaths of time had passed, but there was still no one to be seen. It didn't take long for 300 breaths of time to pass. Han Yu's face became unsightly when no one arrived even after 300 breaths of time had passed. Wu Yuan shrugged. Han Yu, you can't blame me for this. It was you who refused. Han Yu's face grew even more unsightly. When 309 breaths of time passed, a figure finally crawled up from the stairway. It was Xu Wushen, of course. After Xu Wushen arrived, he laid weakly on the ground and started gasping for breath. Suddenly, the number in the sky started moving again. Someone else was ascending the stairway. However, because of Xu Wushen, no one seemed as tense as they had been just now. Han Yu suddenly gazed at Wu Yuan and said, Wu Yuan, do you still want to make a bet? Let's bet 3,000 violet crystals this time. Wu Yuan asked, Do you have 3,000 violet crystals? I'll use other things as collateral, all right? Han Yu temper flared. Do you dare or not? Wu Yuan said, The same as before? Han Yu hesitated for a moment and said, 200 breaths of time. You win if it's less than 200 breaths of time, and I win if it's more than 200 breaths of time. All right? Wu Yuan pondered deeply for a short while and said, All right, all right. Wu Yuan, you have balls. I, Han Yu, admire you. Han Yu roared with laughter. Suddenly, the numbers in the sky stopped abruptly at 61. Everyone here was stunned. Meanwhile, Yang Yi appeared at the top of the stairway. 61 breaths of time. Everyone here was stunned. Han Yu's eyes were opened wide as he pointed at the green-clothed man, and he seemed like he was frozen on the spot. Wu Yuan was stunned on the spot as well. He simply seemed like he was petrified. How presumptuous of you. You actually dared to cheat in my White Deer Academy? I'll kill you. Suddenly, the old man who led the group from the Law faction roared furiously, and then he slapped his right palm towards Yang Yi from afar. A huge energy palm flashed forward, and it emanated a terrifying aura that could obliterate the world as it smashed down towards Yang Yi. After his skin had finished shedding, Yang Yi immediately rushed over because he was afraid that something would happen to Nanjing and Shuushen. However, he hadn't expected someone to attack him as soon as he arrived. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Yang Ye's eyes as he gazed at the gray-robed old man. Because he was that mysterious old man who'd attacked Yang Yi outside White Deer City that day. Yang Yi hadn't forgotten the old man's aura. He clenched his right fist and swung it forward. Divine Fist of Destruction. The gray-robed old man's attack shook violently before exploding into pieces, and Yang Yi took a few dozen steps back. The pupils of everyone in the surroundings constricted, and it was especially so for the members of White Deer Academy, because they were very well aware how strong the gray-robed old man was. That was exactly why they were shocked. Wu Yuan and Han Yu exchanged glances, and they saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. As for Lin Yuan, she was completely dumbstruck. She'd been dumbstruck since the moment she saw Yang Yi, because she hadn't imagined that the man who'd humiliated her that day would have actually been Yang Yi, who'd come from Pine Prefecture to challenge White Deer Academy. Xiao Yushi had a trace of shock in her eyes as well. Similarly, she hadn't expected that this fellow who called her his wife was actually Yang Yi. The gray-robed old man was instantly stunned when he saw his attack being blasted apart, and it didn't take long for shock to surge into his eyes. Even though he'd merely used less than 30% of his strength because he was shocked, it was still not something that a half-saint could resist. It didn't take long for his shock to transform into undisguised ghastly killing intent. The gray-robed old man was about to attack again. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly gazed at the Law Faction's group and said, "Law Faction, do you have any shame? Do you? Honor is something you fight for with the fist." The gray-robed old man grunted coldly and was about to attack. However, Yang Yi suddenly condensed an intense sword and pointed it at the gray-robed old man. "Are you the one who'll be competing with my Ocean of Clouds Academy today? If you are, then I won't say anything. Let's start the battle right now. The heavens will decide which one of us lives." Interesting. Wu Yuan had a grin on the corners of his mouth. "What a temper," Han Yu added. "He really does have a fiery temper. I just wonder what his strength is like." Wu Yuan's gaze descended onto the gray-robed old man. "I'd like to know how thick Luosen's skin is." The gray-robed old man called Luosen had an extremely gloomy expression on his face. He would naturally not say that he was the one who would be competing with Ocean of Clouds Academy, and it was impossible for him to compete with Yang Yi. What a joke! He was the dignified head elder of the Law Faction. Regardless of whether he won or lost, the world would ridicule him for fighting a half-saint in single combat. Luosan stared fixedly at Yang Yi for a short while, and then he said, "The reason I attack was because you cheated in my White Deer Academy. Such actions are an insult to my White Deer Academy, and it truly deserves death." "I cheated." Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't understand what you're saying. You still intend to keep that act up?" Luosen roared furiously. "Let me ask you a question. Did you come up through that stone stairway?" Yang Yi replied, "Didn't you see that for yourself?" Luosen questioned, "Then why were you able to reach the peak in such a short amount of time?" Yang Yi frowned. He still didn't understand what Luosan was talking about. Meanwhile, Shuushen walked over to him and explained about the stone stairway. As soon as he finished speaking, Shuushen moved close to Yang Yi and spoke softly. "Did you really not cheat?" Yang Yi immediately came to an understanding once he finished listening to Shuushen. He disregarded Shuushen's question, gazed at Luoshin and chuckled. "So the time it took me was too short. So you say that I cheated?" Yang Yi suddenly laughed coldly when he spoke up to this point. "How laughable! Not only are the students of your Law Faction useless and take more than 100 breaths of time to ascend those stairs, you can't even stand the sight of others being quicker. Do you have no shame? How presumptuous! You!" Luosen roared furiously. He was just about to say something when Yang Yi suddenly interrupted him and shouted with fury, "You're the one who's being presumptuous. Since you think I cheated, why don't I do it again while all of you watch? If I didn't cheat, then you have to admit that your law faction is useless before everyone. Do you dare? If I cheated, then I'll take my own life. Do you dare or not? Luo Sen's face was unsightly to the extreme while terrifying killing intent arose around him. Meanwhile, Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings and said, "My Ocean of Clouds Academy is only a minor power. In the end, we're still part of White Deer Academy, and Dean Shang's lifelong dream was to lead Ocean of Cloud Academy students back to White Deer Academy. However, the law faction refused to allow it, and it even repeatedly sent experts to deal with us in Pine Prefecture. For the sake of protecting the academy, Dean Shang was even forced to detonate himself and take the law faction's experts down with him." Yang Yi paused for a moment at this point, and then he continued, "Fine. It was because we are weak, and it isn't your fault. Now, I've come here as agreed on behalf of Ocean of Clouds Academy. If I, Yang Yi, lost in a fair fight and was killed, I wouldn't resent you at all. However, your law faction hasn't fought me fairly, and it has been constantly using devious methods to try and kill me. Allow me to tell you that I look down on such actions. I look down on all of you." His voice rumbled like a thunderclap and resounded through the sky. The members of the law faction were exasperated when they heard Yang Yi, and one of their students leaped forward and arrived in front of Yang Yi. "Yang Yi, didn't you want a fair fight? I'll have a fair fight with you." He was about to attack while he spoke, but a figure suddenly appeared in front of him before he could even attack. After that, he felt extreme pain come from his stomach while blood sprayed from his mouth, and his figure was blasted flying. In the end, he crashed to the ground, and his figure twitched for a while before going completely still. "He's been killed in an instant. How dare you?" Luo Sen was livid and he was about to attack again. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly chuckled. "See? When the young fail, the old will act. Law faction, are you good for anything? Are you? Allow me to say something." Suddenly, the white-robed old man who led the group from the scholarly faction suddenly stood up and broke his silence. He sized up Yang Yi and nodded slightly to Yang Yi before he gazed at Luo Sen. "Brother Luo, I'm sure you're very well aware if that child cheated earlier, and everyone here knows it very well as well. Why continue putting on a scene like a clown?" Luo Sen laughed coldly, and then he gazed at Yang Yi and said, "I just wanted to provide him with some guidance because he seemed not bad. Unfortunately, he didn't appreciate my kindness. That old fellow is even more thick-skinned than you." Shu Shin puckered his lips while disdain filled his eyes. The white-robed old man nodded. "So that's why. I knew you, Luo Sen, were no thick-skinned and shameless person. So how could you have possibly tried to bully the young?" Luo Sen's face twitched, and he glanced coldly at the white-robed old man before he said, "Yun Xingzi, stop being sarcastic. Didn't he want a fair fight? All right, I'll give him a fair fight. Otherwise, he'll think that my law faction has no one capable." He gazed at Yang Yi at this point and said, "Yang Yi, since you've come to participate in my White Deer Academy's competition, then you have to act according to the rules of my White Deer Academy. You have no problem with that, right?" "Of course not." Yang Yi smiled. "In any case, I've already seen you act shamelessly and bully someone younger like me, so it doesn't matter if you act even more shamelessly after this." Luo Sen laughed coldly. "According to the rules of my academy, the first round is an elimination round, and it'll continue until one side is annihilated or admits defeat. Do you have any problem with that?" Yang Yi replied, "None." Luo Sen continued, "Since you have no problem, then let's begin." As soon as he spoke, he waved his right hand, and then 10 figures suddenly appeared in the arena. There were 8 men and 2 women amongst them. All of them were saints. 10 saints. How shameless! Shu Shin instantly started cursing. They only had 3 on their side, and all of them were half-saints. But the law faction had sent out 10 students, and all of them were saints. So they were clearly intending to act shamelessly. Shameless? Luo Sen laughed coldly. Your Ocean of Clouds Academy is weak, and so are the 3 of you. Is that our fault? Yang Yi glanced at those saints. Their auras were deep like an ocean. He had no doubt that they were no ordinary saints. But it was obvious because the law faction was aware of his and Nanjing's strength. so how could they possibly send weaklings to give their lives away? The Law faction clearly intended to annihilate them in this round of the competition. Xianxia glanced at the old man from the scholarly faction, and the latter remained silent. Luosun grinned. Xianxia, it's fine if you're afraid. Our Law faction isn't heartless. You just have to kneel below the arena, kowtow, and admit your mistakes to our Law faction. Then we'll allow you to live. All right? There's no need to egg me on. Xianxia continued. Since you're so desperate to kill us, then bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia flashed up into the arena. At the same time, Nanjing and Shuwushen followed closely behind him. Good. Luosun laughed coldly. Xianxia, you're brave. Don't worry. We'll keep your corpse intact. What's with all the crap? Xianxia looked Luosun in the eyes. Stop wasting time, all right? Fury surged onto Luosun's face as he said, Since you're in such a rush to die, I'll fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, Luosun waved his right hand. An array of dazzling white light erupted on the arena. The white light was like a barrier that covered the arena. At the same time, Xianxia and the others' fields of vision warped, and it didn't take long for them to appear on a desolate plain. It's a pocket of space used as a battlefield. Shuwushen spoke solemnly. But we're still in the arena, and the others outside can still watch what's going on in here. There's a special formation covering the arena. So, Shuwushen hadn't even finished speaking when the 10 saints before them had started charging towards them. Let's fight. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with a Nanjing. Shuwushen didn't charge forward with them. He hesitated for a moment on the spot, and then he turned around and shot towards the distance. It didn't take long for him to vanish into the sky. He fled in the face of battle. Everyone outside the arena was stunned by this scene. A short while passed before the members of the Law faction started laughing coldly. That's a so-called elite of Ocean of Clouds Academy? Does it have no one else who's capable? They actually sent such a humiliating piece of trash. How could there be any capable experts from a lousy place like that? But he does know his limitations well. Ha 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 ha. Han Yu and Wu Yuan exchanged glances, and they saw a slight smile in each other's eyes. Han Yu said, That fellow is quite interesting. He knew he would be a burden, so he left right away. Wu Yuan glanced at the forces from White Deer Academy in the distance and said, Did you notice? Regardless of whether it's the scholarly faction or the Law faction, none of the comparatively famous geniuses in their younger generation are here. Looks like something really is happening today. We'll know what they intend to do once those 3 kids die. When he spoke up to this point, Han Yu gazed at Wu Yuan and said, Want to make another bet? I bet that those 3 kids will definitely die. Wu Yuan raised his head to look at the arena, and then he pondered deeply for a moment before he shook his head. Han Yu chuckled. Looks like you realized as well. They aren't just saints. They've definitely cultivated some sort of combination technique. Not to mention those 2 kids, even we would probably be unable to deal with their joint forces in a short period. Even though Luosun is thick-skinned, he is no fool. He didn't underestimate his opponents and send the members of his Law faction to their deaths. Wu Yuan spoke curiously. The scholarly faction clearly intends to protect those 2 kids. So why didn't they stop him? There are only 2 possibilities. Han Yu continued. The first is that they don't care about their fate. The second is that they want to see the limits of those kids' strengths. Wu Yuan nodded. I'd like to see the limit of their strengths as well. In the battlefield, Xianxia had a solemn expression on his face after less than 10 minutes of battle. Because these 10 fellows weren't just saints, every single one of them was extremely strong. Moreover, they were quite terrifying when they worked together, and their cooperation practically had no flaws. Even he who possessed the enlightened sword heart found it to be useless at this moment. The enlightened sword heart could locate flaws, but it depended on the target. Some would cultivate to the point those flaws ceased to exist. As for these 10 saints, every single one of them had flaws and weak points if they were viewed individually. However, when they joined forces both offensively and defensively, every one of their flaws and weak points were instantly offset by each other. So they had no flaws or weak points any longer. Coupled with the fact that all of them were an entire realm higher than a Nanjing and him, both of them showed signs of being suppressed after a short moment of battle. Or it should be said that if he didn't rely on the advantage he had from the cultivation of his body, then he would have been defeated by now. As for a Nanjing, she would also have been defeated by now if it wasn't for her extraordinarily formidable instinct in combat. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then he suddenly shouted, "Jinger!" The corners of a Nanjing's eyes twitched slightly when she heard him, and then a strand of terrifying intent suddenly surged out from within her. At the same time, void rank sword intent surged out from within Yang Yi as well. The saints from the Law faction immediately felt like countless mountains were pressing down upon them, and it caused them to be unable to work together so smoothly anymore. However, only a moment passed before 10 terrifying auras surged out from within them. It was the imposing aura of saints. Their auras immediately fused together and blocked off Yang Yi and a Nanjing's intents. Meanwhile, Yang Yi and a Nanjing had escaped the battlefield and appeared around 100 m away. Slash! Yang Yi roared furiously as he held the intense sword within the ancient sheath and drew it swiftly. OM! A brilliant ray of sword energy shot forward while accompanied by a sword howl, and it was like an extremely dazzling shooting star. It was 90 overlapped heaven rens. At this moment, even space was rippling before it. The expressions of those 10 saints changed, and one of them hurriedly shouted, "Fuse!" As soon as he shouted, all of them formed a straight line, and then a blue circle of light appeared beneath their feet. When Yang Ye's sword energy arrived before them, a blue barrier of light flashed out from within the circle of light, and it obstructed Yang Ye's sword energy. Bang! A huge explosion resounded as the blue barrier of light shook violently, but it didn't crack apart. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly while a trace of seriousness appeared in his eyes. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from amidst the 10 saints. "Attack!" As soon as it resounded, a ray of blue light suddenly surged out from the circle of blue light below their feet, and it enveloped them. A moment later, a blue pillar of light erupted from within it, and it was so swift that it practically instantly arrived before Yang Yi and a Nanjing. A cold glow flashed through a Nanjing's eyes as she held tightly onto Sky Split and swiftly stabbed it forward. Bang! Sky Split and the blue pillar of light shook violently, and then the pillar of light started cracking apart a moment later. However, a Nanjing's countenance turned slightly pale. Meanwhile, a ray of sword energy struck the pillar of light, and it instantly sliced the cracking pillar of light into two. A huge explosion resounded as a terrifying wave of energy swept out from the point of collision, and it was about to drown Yang Yi and a Nanjing beneath it. However, it was obstructed by the intent they released. "Kill!" A voice resounded from amidst the 10 saints again, and then countless beams of blue light surged out from the blue circle of light. They shot towards Yang Yi and a Nanjing like a storm. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly as he waved his sword swiftly. Countless rays of sword energy shot forward and collided against the beams of blue light. Meanwhile, a Nanjing's figure flashed and shot towards those 10 saints. Outside the arena, everyone including Luo Sen and the others from the Law faction had solemn expressions on their faces. After all, 2 half-saints were fighting 10 saints, yet they were fighting them almost equally. At this moment, everyone was shocked, because those 10 saints from the Law faction were no ordinary saints. They were the elites of the Law faction. Moreover, they'd even cultivated formidable combination techniques. It could be said that the 10 of them could even defeat 20 saints who hadn't relied on any external forces to attain the saint realm. Yet now they were being rivaled by just 2 half-saints. Luo Sen's face was gloomy, and killing intent flashed within his eyes. Lin Yuan was completely stunned. She hadn't expected Yang Ye's strength to actually be so terrifying. Lin Yuan instantly felt embarrassed when she recalled what she'd said to Yang Yi in the past. Xiao Yuxi's gaze was locked on Yang Yi for a while before she started pondering deeply. It didn't take long for her brows to be knit tightly together while traces of pain could be seen in her eyes. Han Yu suddenly asked, "Are they really from Pine Prefecture?" Wu Yuan replied, If they weren't sucked into this vortex within White Deer Academy, I would have considered taking them to my martial sect. What a pity. Han Yu nodded in agreement. Indeed. In the pocket of space, the battle between those 10 saints and Yang Ye's duo had become heated. They were exchanging blows repeatedly, but they weren't able to harm each other. So they fell into a stalemate. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, because it would grow more disadvantageous to him and in Nanjing if the battle dragged on. But if he wanted to resolve the battle quickly, then he had to expose some of his trump cards. Yang Yi was very clearly aware that while these 10 saints were very strong, they were absolutely not the strongest experts in the law faction. In other words, there might be even stronger experts waiting for him and in Nanjing in the next rounds. Moreover, it would be quite unwise to expose his trump cards now. But if he didn't, then the stalemate between them would definitely continue. He was confident that he could continue fighting and defeat them in the end, because the moment they revealed a weak point or flaw in their combination would be the moment they won. Right when Yang Yi was hesitant, a ray of red light suddenly shot down from the sky. The red light shot down like a shooting star. Everywhere it passed, space started to ripple, and even Yang Yi was visibly moved by the terrifying aura it contained. An Emperor rank technique. It's an Emperor rank technique at least. At this moment, Yang Yi and the others in the battlefield were stunned, and the others outside the arena were stunned as well. Why has an Emperor rank technique suddenly appeared here? Someone suddenly shouted, "It's that fellow who fled earlier." Everyone else instantly recalled Shu Wuxin who'd fled just now. Many of them had unconsciously forgotten him because the battle between Yang Ye's duo and the Law Factions group was too intense, and they hadn't expected that fellow to actually return with a powerful technique. At this moment, the faces of the experts from the Law Faction had become unsightly to the extreme. Bang! The red light shot into the group of 10 saints. In an instant, space trembled violently as countless rays of red light shot out in all directions, causing the formation between the 10 saints to be dispersed. Moreover, one of them was even killed on the spot. As for the rest, they'd been caught off guard, so even if they hadn't been killed on the spot, they suffered extremely heavy injuries. Kill! Yang Yi and Nanjing would naturally not allow such an opportunity to escape them, and they immediately charged towards those heavily injured saints. Stop! We admit defeat. Luo Sen's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly shouted with rage. At the same time, he waved his right hand, and the scene within the battlefield warped. It didn't take long for Yang Ye's group of 3 to appear in the arena, but there were no experts of the Law Faction around them. Luo San was stunned upon witnessing this scene, and then he howled with fury. You killed them! Yang Yi shrugged. You were too slow. You can't blame me for that, right? You did it on purpose. Luo San spoke furiously. Die! As soon as he finished speaking, Luo San stretched out his right hand and clawed at them. A huge palm flashed forward and clawed at Yang Ye's group on the arena. Old dog! I can't stand you any longer. Yang Ye's furious roar resounded, and then a pillar of blood shot up into the sky and instantly turned the sky blood red. As soon as the pillar of blood shot into the sky, a beam of blood-red sword energy carried boundless slaughter intent and void-rank sword intent as it flashed through the air. Countless people hadn't even recovered from their shock when Luo Sen's palm was instantly obliterated, and then it shot through Luo Sen's body. Luo Sen's eyes instantly opened wide as his figure stiffened. As for the beam of sword energy, it hadn't vanished, and it was shooting towards a pavilion in the distance. However, a huge palm tore through space when it was about to strike the pavilion and slammed against the blood-red beam of sword energy. Bang! The beam of blood-red sword energy was blasted apart and dispersed. Meanwhile, the huge palm was waved slightly, and the aftershock from the explosion instantly vanished. It didn't take long for the huge palm to vanish and everything to return to calm. After that, a white-haired old man appeared here. The old man glanced at Luo Senator at this moment. Luo San was looking at the old man as well, and there was a pleading expression in his eyes. However, the old man shook his head slightly. Bang! Luo Sen's body exploded apart, and then countless strands of profound energy surged out like a torrent from within him. A saint had perished. A high-rank saint had perished just like that. Everyone here had solemn expressions on their faces. Even Xing Yunzi from the scholarly faction, Wu Yuan, and Han Yu had solemn expressions on their faces. That attack Yang Yi executed just now was too terrifying. Not to mention Luosen, even they might perish if they were caught off guard by it. At this moment, all of their gazes had descended onto Yang Yi, who seemed like a person made of blood. At this moment, Yang Yi was emanating boundless slaughter intent, and it caused the others in the surroundings to feel a chill run down their spines. Especially those with comparatively weaker cultivations, they even couldn't prevent their bodies from shivering. There was a blood-red sword in Yang Ye's left grasp, and it was madly absorbing the blood within Luo Sen's body. In Heaven's Gravestone's opinion, the stronger a person was, the tastier that person's blood would be. Yang Ye's eyes were slightly closed, and his entire body was trembling incessantly. And Nanjing was by Yang Ye's side, and her gaze was on the white-haired old man who'd just arrived here. Moreover, Sky Split was spinning at high speeds in her grasp, and she seemed to be vigilant. The white-haired old man glanced at a Nanjing before starting to walk towards Yang Yi. Xing Yunzi's eyes narrowed slightly upon witnessing this scene, and then his right hand moved slightly. A talisman exploded apart within his grasp. In next to no time, the white-haired old man arrived 30 m away from Yang Yi. Hiss! The spear in a Nanjing's grasp shot forward and instantly arrived before the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man's expression remained unchanged as he stretched out a finger and tapped it lightly against Sky Split. Sky Split instantly shook violently before being bounced back. At the same time, the old man's finger shook slightly while some almost unnoticeable cracks appeared on it. A wisp of surprise flashed through the old man's eyes, and then he raised his head to look at a Nanjing. Your weapon isn't bad, and you're even better. Are you a student of Ocean of Clouds Academy? And Nanjing tightened her grip on Sky Split. At this moment, her hand was trembling. It wasn't that she was afraid. The trembling had been caused by the powerful force contained within Sky Split when she grabbed it earlier. Even though you're not bad, you're still too weak. As soon as the white-haired old man finished speaking, he stretched his right hand forward, and then a powerful aura surged out and instantly enveloped a Nanjing. Bang! Suddenly, a terrifying strand of intent surged out from within a Nanjing, and it blocked off the old man's aura. Fist intent? Not bad. But it still isn't enough. The old man shook his head slightly. Bang! Suddenly, another strand of intent surged out from within a Nanjing, and both intents instantly fused together to resist the old man's aura. Battle intent? There was a trace of surprise in the old man's eyes. Bang! 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 The old man had just finished speaking when a few more intents surged out from within a Nanjing. All of them fused together to form a completely new intent. Meanwhile, the old man's aura was completely useless against a Nanjing. At this moment, everyone here was stunned. Wu Yuan had even stood up while disbelief filled his eyes. Battle intent, fist intent, spear intent. There was shock in the old man's eyes. You actually possess 6 intents, and all of them are at the void rank. Most importantly, you've actually fused all of them into a completely new intent. Good. Very good. I never expected that such a genius like you would have actually appeared in Pine Prefecture. I'd intended to show mercy out of consideration for your talent, but based on your expression, I presume you definitely won't submit to my law faction. Since it's like that, then die. The old man was about to act when Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes. 2 beams of blood-red light shot out from his eyes and instantly arrived before the old man. The old man's expression remained indifferent as he waved his right hand lightly, and those beams of light were instantly dispersed. An ominous and bloodthirsty sword. You'll be a calamity if you're allowed to live. Die! He was about to attack at this point, but a violet-robed old man suddenly arrived here. The violet-robed old man paid no attention to the white-haired old man, and he went over to Yang Yi instead. And Nanjing was about to attack when the violet-robed old man smiled slightly to her. I have no ill intent towards him. He stretched out his hand and tapped a finger against the center of Xianxia's forehead. And then a strand of blue, profound energy flowed through the tip of his finger and entered Xianxia. Bang! Suddenly, a ray of blood-red light surged out from the center of Xianxia's forehead, and the violet-robed old man's finger was immediately pushed away. Moreover, the old man was even pushed a few steps back. There was a trace of surprise in the violet-robed old man's eyes. What a powerful sword of slaughter! Even I can't suppress it. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly closed his eyes, and then a short while passed before his body started to return to normal. It didn't take long for Xianxia to completely return to normal, and then he opened his eyes and took a deep breath while a wave of fear still lingered in his heart. Earlier, he'd been almost unable to suppress the slaughter intent and evil energy within Heaven's gravestone. If his void-rank sword intent hadn't experienced an immense improvement lately, then he wouldn't have dared to utilize Heaven's gravestone at all. He'd used his void-rank sword intent to suppress the slaughter intent just now, and that was why he hadn't been completely corrupted by the slaughter intent within Heaven's gravestone. If it was in the past, his void-rank sword intent wouldn't have been able to suppress it at all. But his void-rank sword intent wasn't the same anymore. After condensing it numerous times, he hadn't just learned how to execute Brink's sword intent, it had even allowed his sword intent to undergo a transformation. So, his current void-rank sword intent wasn't inferior to his void-rank slaughter intent at all. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and gazed at the violet-robed old man before him. At the same time, he heaved a slight sigh of relief. Besides, because he truly wanted to kill Luosan, the reason he'd suddenly utilized Heaven's gravestone was because he wanted to prove his worth to the scholarly faction. The scholarly faction hadn't done anything since Luosan started to bully them. As far as he was concerned, there were two possibilities behind this. The first was that the scholarly faction had given up on Ocean of Clouds Academy, and the second was that it wanted to see his worth. It wanted to know if he was worth it for the scholarly faction to go against the law faction. He didn't dare guarantee that it was the later, but he had to give it a try, because Luosan clearly intended to act shamelessly until the end. Now, when he saw the violet-robed old man, he knew that it was definitely the latter. After so many years, Xianxia seems to have fostered two pretty good students. The violet-robed old man gazed at Xianxia and nodded lightly. Xianxia was one of my students. He was really not bad at that time. Unfortunately, he was too headstrong, just like you. Xianxia didn't say anything, nor did he have anything to say. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man spoke abruptly. Su Shurha, you intend to protect them? The violet-robed old man who was called Su Shurha gazed at the white-haired old man. Su Fan, your law faction has gone too far this time. It has gone too far? The white-haired old man called Su Fan chuckled. He killed numerous students of my law faction, and he even just killed the head elder of my law faction. Did you not see all of that? Su Shurha spoke indifferently. You should be very well aware of the reason he killed them. I don't. Su Fan continued. All I do know is that those who kill should pay with their lives. Su Shurha said. We haven't fought for many years. Do you want to spar? Su Fan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was about to speak when Xianxia suddenly spoke. Can I speak a few words? Su Shurha said. Go on. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings and said, there are experts from White Deer Academy and experts from many other powers throughout the Central Divine Prefecture here. I'm sure all of you've witnessed what occurred earlier, and you understand what has happened. Of course, I have no intention to make all of you judge who's right or wrong, because the strength determines the victor. The law faction is much stronger than us, so everything they say is the truth. Xianxia gazed at Su Fan at this point and continued. My Ocean of Clouds Academy is just a minor power, and it can't endure the trouble that the law faction brings to it. We can't afford to offend the law faction as well. Everyone from the law faction, my Ocean of Clouds Academy, will admit defeat in this competition, alright? Because I'm afraid that an emperor might show himself if we continue. Everyone here gazed at the members of the law faction when they heard Xianxia. Wu Yuan gazed at the members of the law faction as well, and he puckered his lips while a trace of disdain could be seen at the corners of his mouth. The Law faction had been bullying Ocean of Clouds Academy since the very beginning, and such actions shouldn't be from a diamond rank power. If Luosen had annihilated Yang Yi during those few times he'd attack, then it wouldn't be a big deal at all. But the laughable part was that not only had he failed to bully Yang Ye's group, he had been killed instead. That was a humiliation. The most laughable part was that another old geezer had shown himself to bully Yang Ye's group. At this moment, many students of the Law faction had quite unsightly expressions on their faces. Because if news of this were to spread, then the Law faction would truly be humiliated. Meanwhile, Yang Yi continued, "I'm telling the truth. Everyone from the Law faction, please spare my Ocean of Clouds Academy. Even though I, Yang Yi, am confident, I'm not confident to the point of thinking about fighting an emperor in single combat. Honestly, we admit defeat. We can't afford to compete here." The expressions of the experts from the Law faction grew even more unsightly, because Yang Ye's words were like slaps to their faces. Su Fan gazed at Yang Yi for a short while before he nodded. "You want a fair fight? Then I'll give you one." As he spoke, he turned around and pulled apart the space before him. After that, he stretched his right hand forward and grabbed. It didn't take long for a man to be grabbed out from within the spatial rift. Jun Hualuo. Su Shurha's expression changed when he saw this man. It wasn't just Su Shurha. Even Wu Yuan and Han Yu's expressions had changed. Jun Hualuo, an expert ranked at the 39th position on the martial rankings. "Master!" The man gazed as Su Fan with bewilderment. Su Fan spoke indifferently. "Deal with these three fellows." Jun Hualuo was slightly stunned, and then he turned around to gaze at Yang Ye's group. He sized them up for a moment before he said, "Don't waste my time. Just come at me as a group. As a group. Fight him as a group." Everyone here was stunned. Yang Yi and Nanjing's strengths were obvious for all to see. It could be said that while they were half-saints, their strengths weren't inferior to saints. Actually, they should be said to possess strengths which far surpassed saints. But Jun Hualuo had actually asked them to fight him together. Everyone here was first shocked, but they didn't laugh at Jun Hualuo once they recovered from it. Nor did they think that Jun Hualuo was overestimating his strength. The martial rankings. Just those words gave Jun Hualuo the right to be arrogant. There were no weaklings on the martial rankings. That was absolutely no joke. "Su Fan, is this really necessary?" Su Shurha gazed at Su Fan and said, "It's just a competition between juniors. Yet you've even summoned someone from the martial rankings." Su Fan laughed coldly. "Didn't they want a fair fight? I gave them a fair fight. As for the martial rankings..." Haha. Hualuo was able to ascend the rankings, yet they weren't. Can that be blamed on Hualuo? Su Shurha's face became gloomy. Meanwhile, Su Fan added, "Besides that, didn't you hear Hualuo? All three of them can fight him together. In the end, they have the advantage. Of course, it's not a problem if they don't dare to fight him. They just have to kowtow 10,000 times to my Law faction, and then sever their own arms. Perhaps I'll consider sparing them then." Su Shurha glanced at Su Fan, and then he gazed at Yang Yi. "There are no weaklings on the martial rankings. Make your own choice." Yang Yi looked Su Shurha in the eyes and said, "We aren't afraid of a battle. What we're afraid of is if some shameless people interfere again later. Or if even older and even more shameless fellows interfere. I guarantee that this match will be absolutely fair." Su Shurha gazed at Yang Yi and said, "If you kill him, then I guarantee that even an emperor won't be able to kill you." If Yang Ye's group killed Jun Hualuo, then it represented that their strength was sufficient to be ranked on the martial rankings. After all, Jun Hualuo was a saint, and they were only half-saints. Geniuses who could be ranked on the martial rankings were worthy of being protected by the scholarly faction at all costs. Meanwhile, Su Fan laughed coldly. "Don't worry, I will absolutely not interfere in your battle. So long as you have the ability, feel free to kill him. I guarantee that I won't interfere." Yang Yi gazed at Su Fan and said, "Anyone who interferes is a swine. All right?" Su Fan's eyes narrowed slightly, and a short while passed before he glanced at Su Shurha. "All right, anyone who interferes later is a swine." Su Shurha, remember what he said. Don't accidentally be a swine later. Su Shurha shook his head slightly because Xianxia's words were equivalent to blocking off any chances he had to retreat with his life. Xianxia didn't waste his breath at all and was about to ascend the arena. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly obstructed his path and said, "I'll do it." Xianxia glanced at Jun Huoluo, who stood in the arena, and said, "He's very strong." And Nanjing replied, "Trust me." Xianxia gazed at her for a long time, and then he nodded. "Be careful." He knew that Nanjing wanted him to maintain his strength, because it was very likely that this battle wouldn't be the end of it, and it was only just the beginning. And Nanjing nodded lightly, and then she ascended the arena. She intends to fight Jun Huoluo on her own? Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene. And Nanjing was only a half-saint, but Jun Huoluo was already a saint. Moreover, he was an expert on the martial rankings. She intends to surmount her realm of cultivation to challenge Jun Huoluo, who's an expert on the martial rankings. Clamorous noise resounded throughout the surroundings. Is she all right in the head? Jun Huoluo is an expert on the martial rankings. She actually intends to surmount her realm of cultivation and fight him? Has she gone mad? I have no doubt that she's a genius, and all geniuses are confident. However, it's very easy for confidence to become conceit. Now, she's being conceited. If she can surmount her realm of cultivation and defeat senior brother Jun Huoluo, then I'll knock my head against a wall and kill myself here. There have been cases of geniuses surmounting their realms of battle to challenge experts on the martial rankings. But those were just rumors. I never expected to actually witness it today. Interesting. Han Yu and Wu Yuan exchanged glances on the guest platform, and a huge amount of interest could be seen in their eyes. Wu Yuan smiled. I'm growing more and more interested in that little girl. Han Yu nodded lightly. It's interesting indeed. Su Shurha gazed at Xianxia and said, Are you sure that you intend to let her fight alone? Xianxia nodded. I trust her. Su Shurha took a deep and long glance at Xianxia, and then he didn't speak another word. Meanwhile, Su Fan laughed coldly. What's it like to overestimate one's ability? I've finally witnessed it now. Xianxia paid no attention to Su Fan, and he gazed at Nanjing instead. At this moment, Nanjing and Jun Huoluo had already appeared in the battlefield within that pocket of space. In the battlefield, Jun Huoluo was sizing up Nanjing, and then he shook his head. Your courage is commendable. Unfortunately, you overestimate your strength. I'll give all of you one final chance. Ask those two friends of yours to join the battle as well. To be honest, I'm not interested in fighting all of you at all. So, I don't want to waste my time with all of you. And Nanjing didn't say anything. She just suddenly stomped her right foot against the ground, and then she transformed into a ray of golden light that shot forward. Jun Huoluo's expression remained unchanged, and then a silver folding fan appeared in his grasp. Meanwhile, Sky Split had arrived in front of him. Jun Huoluo tapped his folding fan forward, and it struck against the tip of Nanjing's spear. Bang! A loud explosion resounded, and then Sky Split and the folding fan shook violently before Nanjing took a few dozen steps back. Meanwhile, Jun Huoluo didn't move at all. However, some almost imperceptible cracks had appeared on his folding fan. Xiwu Shun's expression instantly became extremely solemn when he witnessed this scene. He glanced at Xianxia but noticed that Xianxia was very calm, so he couldn't help but ask, Are you not worried? She asked me to trust her. Xianxia continued, So, she'll definitely win. Xiwu Shun was stunned, and then he laid down on the ground. Meanwhile, Xianxia gazed at him and said, Are you all right? Since Xiwu Shun executed that emperor rank technique just now, he seemed like he was terribly sick and couldn't even get up. Xiwu Shun shook his head slightly and said, I'm just quite exhausted. I'll be fine once I rest for a while. Xianxia nodded slightly, and then he turned around and shot his gaze towards the arena. In the battlefield, Jun Huoluo gazed at Nanjing and nodded slightly. Your spear isn't bad, and your strength isn't bad as well, but it's far from sufficient. As soon as he finished speaking, Jun Huoluo took a step forward and instantly arrived before Nanjing. After that, he tapped his fan forward. In an instant, a few dozen rays of silver light shot out from the fan and instantly enveloped Nanjing. Nanjing moved her right leg back a little, and the tip of her left foot was pressed against the ground as she tightened her grip on Sky Split. A moment later, she suddenly shouted, "Moon Piercer!" and Nanjing immediately transformed into a ray of golden light that shot forward. Everywhere she passed, space trembled and rippled violently. As for the rays of silver light, they were obliterated in an instant, and her spear was like a dazzling ray of golden light as it stabbed at Jun Hualuo. It was impossible to dodge. Jun Hualuo's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he tapped his left foot slightly against the ground and transformed into a ray of light that shot forward explosively. At the same time, he stabbed his folding fan towards the tip of a Nanjing spear. Bang! Space instantly shook violently from the collision. This time, both of them hadn't been pushed back at all. Space Slasher! Suddenly, Nanjing's voice resounded again, and then she shot into the air before she grabbed Sky Split with both hands and swung it down. The expressions of all the spectators outside the arena changed when they saw this move, because even the space in her path had actually started to crack apart. There was a trace of seriousness in Jun Hualuo's eyes as well. His profound energy surged out as his right hand moved slightly, and the folding fan in his grasp was instantly unfolded. A beam of silver light shot into the sky, and it slammed against the tip of a Nanjing spear. Bang! In practically an instant, the beam of silver light shattered into pieces, and then a Nanjing shot down along with her spear and immediately arrived above Jun Hualuo. The latter's expression changed slightly and hurriedly raised his folding fan to block her attack. Bang! A loud explosion resounded as the space throughout here shook once more. Meanwhile, Jun Hualuo's legs instantly bent down, but it didn't take long for him to roar furiously as a beam of silver energy shot out from within him and blasted Nanjing away. At the same time, his figure moved over 50 m back. Sky Split! Suddenly, Nanjing's voice resounded once more, and then she swiftly tossed Sky Split at Jun Hualuo. The spear tore through space, and the space before it was instantly torn apart. At this moment, all the spectators outside the arena had solemn expressions on their faces. The space there was terrifyingly strong, and even the joint attacks of a few dozen saints wouldn't be able to shatter it. But Nanjing had actually been able to tear it apart by herself. At this moment, Su Fan's expression had turned slightly unsightly. Nanjing's spear was extremely swift, and it had practically instantly arrived before Jun Hualuo. The latter's pupils constricted as he instinctively raised his folding fan to block it. Bang! The folding fan had only just come into contact with Sky Split when it shattered apart and was completely obliterated. However, Jun Hualuo had been able to grab Sky Split at the same time, but the powerful force within it blasted him back, and he finally stopped himself after being pushed almost 3 kilometers back. Meanwhile, Sky Split had stabbed his chest, but it wasn't deep and had only gone a few centimeters deep. Good! Suddenly, Wu Yuan cried out with excitement from the guest platform. What a girl! Every single one of those moves were no weaker than a high-grade divine rank technique, and they are comparable to an emperor rank technique when used as one. The most shocking part is that she was actually able to execute those 3 moves with such ease, and they were without any flaws at all. Amazing! Han Yu nodded slightly as well. It's shocking indeed. Meanwhile, Su Fan suddenly glanced at them and said, What are the two of you getting impatient for? Hasn't the battle not ended yet? Wu Yuan smiled. Brother Su, I had no other intentions. I was just sighing with emotion. Ha ha ha. Su Fan glanced at Wu Yuan, and then he shot his gaze back at the arena. At this moment, his face was quite gloomy. Nanjing waved her right hand, and Sky Split immediately flew back into her grasp. She was just about to launch another attack when Jun Hualuo suddenly chuckled. I never expected that I would have actually been injured by a half-saint. All right, you're worthy of me being serious. As soon as he finished speaking, Jun Hualuo stretched his right hand forward slightly, and then suddenly twisted it. In an instant, a speck of silver light shot out from his fist. It was just the size of a grain when it first appeared, but it instantly expanded limitlessly, and it took less than a breath of time for the entire area to be covered in silver. Jun Hualuo's voice resounded. I once relied on this technique to ascend the martial rankings. You can feel honored to be able to die by this technique today. And Nanjing suddenly looked up at the sky instead, and she said, You probably really want to witness my true strength. Yang Ye's gaze descended onto her, and he knew that she was speaking to him. Meanwhile, she spoke again. The first martial god told me that the martial god without a weapon is the true martial god. As soon as she finished speaking, and Nanjing released her grasp on Sky Split, and then she took a step forward. In the name of the martial god. In the name of the martial god. I summon the spirits of the world. Converge. And Nanjing's voice was still resounding when a shocking scene appeared. Countless strands of green energy suddenly appeared within the pocket of space, and they surged incessantly into a Nanjing. At the same time, a Nanjing's body started to grow larger. In less than 2 breaths of time, she was almost 30 m tall, and she seemed like a towering titan. The spirit of the world. Wu Yuan suddenly stood up while his figure shook, and his voice was trembling. She actually possesses the martial god physique. She actually can use that move. She actually can use that move. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? Han Yu had stood up as well, and his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Besides them, Su Shurha and Su Fan were looking at a Nanjing with disbelief as well. The martial god physique. It was ranked at the 2nd position amongst all the unique physiques of the world. It had only appeared once in the entire history of the Radiant Dimension, and it belonged to the number 1 expert of the Radiant Dimension at that time, the founding ancestor of the martial sect. Yang Yi and Xu Wuxin were stunned, because they didn't know anything about the martial god physique. At this moment, and Nanjing was already almost 60 m tall. She looked down at Jun Hualuo, who was stunned by this scene as well, and she didn't speak a single word before slamming her fist forward. Stop! Su Fan's expression changed drastically, and he waved his right hand with the intention of lending Jun Hualuo a hand. Meanwhile, Su Shurha suddenly obstructed his path. What? You intend to be a swine? Fuck off! Su Fan was furious, and he was about to act anyway when a rumbling explosion suddenly resounded from the arena. After that, the entire arena actually started to tremble. Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the arena. At this moment, Jun Hualuo had been instantly obliterated by a Nanjing's punch. At the same time, the pocket of space seemed as if it wasn't able to endure the might of a Nanjing's punch, and it started to shatter into pieces. In next to no time, the arena transformed into powder before their eyes, and a Nanjing had appeared within their fields of vision. At this moment, a Nanjing was still like a titan. You killed Hualuo. Su Fan's eyes almost split apart from rage, and he suddenly slapped his palm towards a Nanjing. A huge palm tore through space and slammed forcefully towards a Nanjing. Su Shurha and Yang Ye's faces fell, and they were about to act when a Nanjing suddenly said, I'll do it. As soon as she spoke, the space before her actually started to crack apart, and then she clenched her right fist and slammed it forward. Bang! Su Fan's attack was instantly obliterated, and then a Nanjing's fist arrived before Su Fan. Su Fan's expression changed drastically as he overlapped his palms and slapped them forward. Bang! A loud explosion resounded, and the spectators watched with astonishment as Su Fan's figure was blasted flying. In the end, he collided with the pavilion behind him, and it shook violently yet remained completely unharmed. Not only the others, even Yang Yi was stunned by this scene. And Nanjing is actually so strong. And Nanjing took a step forward and was about to attack again. However, she suddenly frowned, and then countless strands of green energy seeped out from within her and dispersed into the surroundings. As for Nanjing herself, she quickly returned to normal, and she clearly seemed extremely weak. Her countenance was ghastly pale, and she couldn't even stand properly. So, Yang Yi hurriedly went over to her and took her in his arms. Yang Yi quickly withdrew a violet crystal and fed it to her before he spoke gently. Are you all right? And Nanjing shook her head slightly. Am I strong? Yang Yi grinned. very strong. If you transform before fighting me, then I'll definitely be blasted flying. He wasn't lying because he couldn't fight a Nanjing in that state even if he utilized the brink laws. An imperceptible arc curled up on the corners of a Nanjing's lips. Meanwhile, Xianxia added, "That strength you possessed just now didn't seem to be physical strength, but it was even stronger than physical strength. Those were the energy of the world. It's a move that the first martial god created, and it converged the energy hidden within the world for one's own use. For example, the energy of wind, water, wood, earth. In short, I can use any energy that exists within the world." And Nanjing spoke softly. "In that state, it's equivalent to using all the energy that can be used within this world." "So that's what it was." Xianxia nodded lightly and asked, "Can I do the same?" She shook her head. "I think only someone with my physique can accommodate all those types of energy." "What a pity," Xianxia thought to himself. Xianxia was about to speak when Su Fan's ferocious voice suddenly resounded from afar. "You actually killed Hualuo. Die!" As soon as Su Fan's voice resounded, Xianxia turned around and instantly saw a huge palm tear through space towards him. Su Shurha was about to act when an old man in linen robe suddenly appeared before him and a Nanjing, and then the old man slammed his fist at the huge energy palm. Bang! The palm shook violently and dispersed in midair. Wu Yuan. Su Shurha was slightly surprised, but it didn't take long for him to recall something, and his expression instantly became unsightly to the extreme. "Wu Yuan." Su Fan spoke with a ferocious expression on his face. "This is an internal affair of my White Deer Academy. It has nothing to do with your martial sect." "It doesn't." Wu Yuan laughed coldly. "That was true before this, but it's related to my martial sect from now on. Su Fan, I've already received an order from my sect master. If anyone dares to touch her from now on, then that person is an enemy of my martial sect." Wu Yuan's tone eased up slightly at this point and said, "Su Fan, I have no intention to go against your law faction. So, please give me some face and don't make things difficult for her." "Then are you telling me that Hualuo died for nothing?" Su Fan spoke ferociously. "Wu Yuan, this is White Deer Academy nor your martial sect." Wu Yuan spoke indifferently. "Since it's like that, then make your move." Su Fan clenched his fists tightly and was about to attack. Suddenly, Su Shurha said, "Wu Yuan, this really is my White Deer Academy's business, and my scholarly faction will be responsible for her safety until the end. You don't have to get concerned for nothing." Xianxia's group of 3 were stunned when they witnessed this scene. What exactly is going on? Meanwhile, Han Yu suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia and a Nanjing. Han Yu's gaze descended onto a Nanjing who was resting in Xianxia's arms and said, "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Han Yu, an outer court elder of the Devil Path." "Right, that isn't the main point. The main point is that I just received a message from my sect master. So long as you agree, he'll take you as his disciple right now. You just have to agree, and no one will dare to touch you from now on. Besides that, shut up." Meanwhile, Su Shurha and Wu Yuan shouted furiously at the same time. Su Shurha glanced at Wu Yuan and Han Yu. "She's from my White Deer Academy." "Su Shurha, even you are acting shamelessly now?" Wu Yuan laughed coldly. "She's clearly from Ocean of Clouds Academy. When did she become a member of White Deer Academy?" "Ocean of Cloud Academy belongs to my White Deer Academy's scholarly faction." Su Shurha spoke solemnly. "She's naturally a student of my White Deer Academy." "What nonsense!" Wu Yuan suddenly shouted. "Based on what you said, doesn't that mean everyone who practices in the martial Tao is a disciple of my martial sect? I'm not going to waste my breath on you. The experts of my martial sect are on the way, and it'll take 30 breaths of time at most for them to get here. At that time, we'll use strength to decide this." "All right, I agree." Han Yu spoke coldly. "In any case, the members of my Devil Path are on the way as well. All of you seem to have forgotten that this is White Deer Academy." Suddenly, a voice resounded from afar, and then an old man who held a cane in his hand arrived here. Han Yu, Wu Yuan, and Su Shurha's expressions changed drastically when they saw him. Yang Ye's expression had become extremely serious as well. The old man gave him the same feeling that Lu Qianyun had given him that day. Su Shurha was about to speak when the old man glanced at him. "Little Su, there's no need to say anything. If you want to stop me, then it's best if you immediately awaken Fang Zhouzi. But I think that it's too late to awaken him now." Su Shurha's expression was extremely unsightly. The old man disregarded Han Yu and Wu Yuan, and his gaze descended onto a Nanjing. "If you're willing to join my law faction, then I'm prepared to let bygones be bygones." And Nanjing replied, "I would rather die standing than kneel to live." The old man gazed at her for a short while, and then he nodded, as expected of the possessor of the martial god physique. "Your strength isn't bad, and your mentality is even better. Since that's the case, then die." The old man was about to attack when roaring laughter resounded abruptly in the air. "Good! As expected of I Hao Tian's disciple. Dying on your feet is better than lying on your knees. Ha ha ha." A green-robed old man appeared here at the same time that voice finished resounding. The face of the old man with the cane turned gloomy when he saw the green-robed old man. Actually, it should be described as becoming unsightly. Wu Yuan hurriedly went over to greet the old man and spoke respectfully. "Martial ancestral uncle," Hao Tian suddenly shouted with fury. "Tell me why you didn't notify me upon discovering the martial god physique. Moreover, you notified that kid, Ming Yuan, instead? Why?" Wu Yuan was at a loss for words. Just you wait and see what I do to you." Hao Tian glared fiercely at Wu Yuan, and a bitter expression instantly crept up on the latter's face. Hao Tian paid no further attention to Wu Yuan, and he turned around to gaze at the old man with the cane instead. He sized up the old man and smiled. "Oh my, Li Leaguai, long time no see. You've become a quasi-emperor now. All those years ago you were just a saint when I attained the quasi-emperor realm. Such natural talent really isn't bad. So, wanna have a spar? But let me tell you in advance that once I get into battle, I wouldn't be able to fully control the chaotic energy within me. It would be bad if I kill you by accident." The old man with a cane called Li Leaguai had an extremely gloomy expression on his face, and a short while passed before he spoke. "Since it's someone senior Hao Tian has taken a liking to, then how could I possibly not give you some face? Go ahead and take her. You know how to yield when you need to. Not bad. No wonder those old fellows from the law factions let you be their representative." Hao Tian roared with laughter, and then he turned around to gaze at a Nanjing. "Disciple, let's go." Meanwhile, Wu Yuan walked over to Hao Tian's side, and then he pointed at Yang Yi. "Martial ancestral uncle, this kid isn't bad as well." The meaning behind his words was that he wanted Hao Tian to take Yang Yi as well. Su Shurha's expression changed drastically when he heard Wu Yuan, and he was about to speak, but Hao Tian suddenly waved his hand. "He's trash before her." Yang Yi was speechless, and Nanjing suddenly gazed at Yang Yi. "I go where he goes." Hao Tian was stunned, and then he gazed at Yang Yi and spoke seriously. "Kid, your bone structure is amazing. So you're definitely an outstanding genius to train in martial arts. How about you go with me to the martial sect as well? I'll even find you a master who isn't weaker to me." Yang Yi felt speechless again. Yang Yi remained silent. Su Shurha instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Yang Yi remain silent, and he said, "Yang Yi, don't worry. So long as you're within White Deer Academy, then I'll guarantee all of your safety with my life. Don't listen to his nonsense." Hao Tian spoke bluntly. "That kid is trash. He isn't a match for Li Leaguai at all. As for the other quasi-emperor from their scholarly faction, even he himself is in danger, so it's impossible for him to protect all of you. Not only can I guarantee this little girl's safety if she goes with me, her strength will rise immensely." Su Shurha was about to speak when Hao Tian suddenly glared angrily at him. "Kid, do you want to fight me in single combat? Do you?" Su Shurha was speechless. Hao Tian grunted coldly, and then he gazed at a Nanjing. "Little girl, you possess the martial god physique, so you'll only be able to unearth your potential effectively at my martial sect. Moreover, my martial sect possesses countless resources. So long as you come to my martial sect, I guarantee that you'll be able to rise to at least the top 20 on the martial rankings within 3 years. Yang Yi frowned and spoke with dissatisfaction. Only the top 20? Kid. Hao Tian continued. Do you know how abnormal those fellows on the martial rankings are? Even though that fellow Junhuoluo was on the martial rankings as well, but he was at the bottom. Do you know how abnormal those little fellows at the top are? Let me explain it like this. Even I would dare not say that I'll be able to defeat those monstrous geniuses in the top 10. Understand? Yang Yi was visibly shocked. He didn't know how terrifying those monstrous geniuses in the top 10 were, but he was very well aware how terrifying this old geezer was. It could be said that while the old man wasn't really at the Emperor realm, he was absolutely not inferior to Lu Chenyun, who was at the Emperor realm. Hao Tian continued, Kid, her natural talent is absolutely extraordinary, and it'll be a waste of her potential to leave her at White Deer Academy. Moreover, her life might be in danger as well. I'm sure you've realized that the internal strife within White Deer Academy is already at such a state, so why make her get mixed up in all of that? Su Shurha intended to say something, but he just sighed in the end. He really wanted to keep in Nanjing. After all, it was the martial god physique. It had only appeared once in the history of the Radiant Dimension. However, he knew that unless the Law faction and Scholarly faction joined forces, it would be impossible to keep her. Moreover, based on the current circumstances, it was absolutely impossible. Yang Yi remained silent for a long time before he lowered his head to look at Nanjing. What do you think? And Nanjing answered without the slightest hesitation. I'll go with you. Yang Yi shook his head slightly. Jinger, I'm sure you've realized that there are too many experts in this world, and we're too weak. I want you to stay by my side, and I won't want to be separated from you. But you won't be of any help if you stay with me. Or I should say that staying with me will restrain your growth. Understand? He naturally wouldn't allow her to stay in White Deer Academy. The Scholarly faction was even on the verge of being unable to save itself, so how could it possibly protect Nanjing? Just like the incident from before, if this old geezer from the martial sect hadn't arrived, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Besides that, Nanjing's natural talent was absolutely superb, and it was even greater than his own. So long as she was given an opportunity and a platform to grow, then she would definitely ascend to greatness. While he didn't want her to leave and knew that she would definitely stay if he asked her to, he couldn't act so selfishly. And Nanjing didn't belong solely to him. She liked the martial Dao, so she would definitely want to go further on the path towards the martial Dao. Thus, he couldn't restrain her. And Nanjing gazed at him and said, We can leave together. Su Shurha's expression changed drastically when he heard Nanjing. Nanjing's departure was an immeasurable loss to White Deer Academy. And if even Yang Yi left, then the Scholarly faction would suffer a horrible loss. Su Shurha was about to speak when Yang Yi shook his head. How could he be unable to discern that the old geezer from the martial sect only thought highly of Nanjing? If he were to go with them, they wouldn't attach importance to fostering him at all. Besides that, he couldn't leave White Deer Academy. It wasn't that he felt attachment to White Deer Academy. It was because Ocean of Clouds Academy needed the Scholarly faction's protection. There was no relationship between the martial sect and Ocean of Clouds Academy, nor were there any linked interests between them. So, it was impossible for it to fight the Law faction for Ocean of Clouds Academy. Su Shurha instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Yang Yi shake his head. Yang Yi smiled when he saw Nanjing remain silent. I'll support you regardless of what decision you make. And Nanjing suddenly raised her head and gazed at Hao Tian. How strong are you? Experts were picky about their disciples, and true monstrous geniuses were naturally picky about their masters as well. Hao Tian naturally understood that principle as well, so he pointed at Li Leaguai and said, We are both quasi-emperors, but he'll definitely lose to me within 100 moves. He gazed at Li Leaguai, who'd revealed an unsightly expression, and continued, If you think I'm wrong, then we can spar right now. Li Leaguai's face was extremely gloomy, and a short while passed before he spoke indifferently. Senior Hao Tian is someone who's about to leave this world. How could I be a match for Senior Hao Tian? Hao Tian roared with laughter. Kid, you're quite sensible. Otherwise, I'd definitely beat you up. He gazed at Nanjing at this point and said, Little girl, I won't beat around the bush with you. The reason I'm anxious to take you as my disciple is because I'll be leaving this world soon. My inheritance would come to an end if I don't leave it behind before leaving Radiant Dimension. I haven't had any disciples in the past because they weren't up to my standards or weren't suitable to receive my inheritance. But you aren't just outstanding. You're really suitable to receive my inheritance. And Nanjing said, I'll go with you. Hao Tian smiled. All right. And Nanjing added, But I have a condition. Hao Tian replied, Go on. She gazed at Yang Yi and said, I want to stay behind and face the law faction with him. Hao Tian frowned slightly. Meanwhile, Yang Yi said, There's no need for that. Let me deal with the rest. He didn't want Nanjing to miss such an opportunity because of him. And Nanjing said, I insist. Yang Yi didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, Wu Yuan, who stood by Hao Tian's side, suddenly said, There are only 3 rounds in the competition, and you've already won 2 rounds. So, there's no need to continue competing. Who says it isn't necessary? Meanwhile, Li Leiguai suddenly spoke. The precondition to winning 2 out of 3 is that they are able to survive the 3rd round. If they die in the 3rd round, then it's naturally my law faction that won. Hao Tian spoke indifferently. Li Leiguai, it's just 3 juniors. Is it necessary to act like this? Li Leiguai gazed at Hao Tian and said, It's related to the reputation of my law faction, and it's related to my law faction's future as well. Of course, if Senior Hao Tian really intends to interfere, then I'll definitely be unable to stop Senior Hao Tian. However, my law faction isn't a force that just allows others to bully it. If worse comes to worse, we can all ask our ancestors to descend to this dimension and have some fun. Hao Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he revealed a hostile expression. Are you threatening me? Li Leiguai looked Hao Tian straight in the eyes and didn't shrink back at all. My White Deer Academy hasn't declined to the point of allowing outsiders to make decisions for it. The atmosphere here seemed like a battle would break out at any moment. Suddenly, Yang Yi spoke. Since you want to compete, then let's continue. If it was possible, he naturally wanted it to come to an end. However, the law faction clearly didn't want to spare them. The reason he'd agreed was because the law faction was still abiding by the rules of the competition. But if that old geezer from the martial sect interfered, then it was very likely for the law faction to stop abiding by the rules. Once that happened, Ocean of Clouds Academy would definitely suffer calamity. Not to mention anything else. Just Su Fan alone was sufficient to crush Ocean of Clouds Academy and City. As for the martial sect, he didn't think they would fight the law faction for Ocean of Clouds Academy. So, he had to rely on himself. Li Leiguai glanced at Yang Yi and spoke indifferently. Since you don't have a problem with it, then let's start? Wait! Hao Tian suddenly gazed at Yang Yi and said, Kid, they clearly intend to kill you. So are you sure? Yang Yi grinned, and then he gazed at Li Leiguai. Will there be a 4th round after the 3rd? Li Leiguai spoke indifferently. Don't worry. This is definitely the last round. Yang Yi nodded. What happens if we win? Li Leiguai replied. Win and you can live. What else do you want? Meanwhile, Su Shirha suddenly spoke. Yang Yi, don't worry. If anyone acts against Ocean of Clouds Academy from today onwards, then it's equivalent to attacking my scholarly faction. They'd lost in Nanjing, so he couldn't allow Yang Yi to leave as well. If he didn't promise Yang Yi anything, then it was very likely that Yang Yi would side with the martial sect and seek its protection. Yang Yi glanced at Su Shirha and said, Thank you. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. Li Leiguai laughed coldly. The precondition is that you survive. Just see if the scholarly faction will protect that Ocean of Clouds Academy of yours if you're dead. Enough of nonsense. Yang Yi looked Li Leiguai in the eyes and said, What's the 3rd round? Li Leiguai replied, We'll decide the victor in this round? Yang Yi replied, All right. Both Nanjing and Shushun were injured, so it wasn't suitable for them to fight another battle. Determining the victor in this round was exactly what he wanted. Li Leiguai waved his right hand, and a stone platform appeared at the center of the square. It didn't take long for the stone platform to transform into an arena of similar size to the one from before. Li Leaguai said, "Go on in." Yang Yi glanced at Li Leaguai. "Don't tell me you're going to fight me in this round? You aren't qualified to fight me." As soon as Li Leaguai finished speaking, a figure instantly arrived in the arena. It was none other than Su Fan. Su Fan gazed coldly at Yang Yi. "I'm your opponent. How shameless." Xu Wushen, who was lying on the ground below, immediately got up. Hao Tian shook his head as well and said, "Now I know what shamelessness is truly like." Su Shi's face was extremely unsightly as well. "Su Fan, have you no shame? Do you have no shame?" Su Fan laughed coldly. "Can I be blamed for his low realm of cultivation? If you aren't satisfied, his Ocean of Clouds Academy can send another high-rank saint to fight this battle." Yang Yi remained silent. "What? You don't have one?" Su Fan laughed coldly. "Since you don't have one, then you can't blame me, right? If you want to blame someone, you should blame your Ocean of Clouds Academy for being useless." Yang Ye's left wrist moved slightly, and the ancient sheath appeared in his grasp. After that, he condensed an intense sword and sheathed it. Once he was done, he gazed at Li Leaguai and said, "Let's begin." Li Leaguai glanced at Yang Yi, and then he waved his right hand. Yang Yi and Su Fan instantly entered a pocket of space. Su Fan laughed coldly upon entering the battlefield in the pocket of space. "Yang Yi, are you a dog? Why do you keep barking?" Yang Yi suddenly drew his sword at the same instant that he finished speaking. "OM." A brilliant ray of sword energy flashed out from Yang Ye's ancient sheath while accompanied by a sword howl. Even the space in the pocket of space rippled before it, and it was shocking. It was 90 overlapped heaven rens. After his body had attained the divine fortitude realm, he could execute 90 overlapped heaven rens with absolute ease. Su Fan's eyes narrowed slightly, and the contempt within his easy had lessened quite a bit. Even though he couldn't stand the sight of Yang Yi, he didn't dare underestimate Yang Yi. He'd witnessed Yang Ye's strength earlier, and he knew that it was entirely capable of posing a threat to him. It would be fine if he didn't underestimate Yang Yi, but if he did, then it was very likely for him to lose this battle that he was certain to win. 0 point. Su Fan pointed his finger forward as soon as he finished speaking, and then a huge black finger shot forward like a bolt of lightning and collided with Yang Ye's sword energy. Bang! Their collision was like the collision of two meteors, and it instantly caused a terrifying wave of energy to erupt from the point of collision. The wave of energy swept swiftly towards the surroundings, and even the space here rippled before it. Slash! Suddenly, Yang Ye's furious howl resounded, and then he transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Everywhere the ray of light passed, even the wave of energy was sliced apart like a piece of paper. Su Fan's eyes had a ferocious expression in them as he watched the sword energy assault him. The profound energy within him surged out madly as he swiftly swung his right palm forward. 0 palm! A huge palm flashed forward, and it was like a blade that slashed down at Yang Yi. Bang! An explosion instantly erupted at the point of collision, and then countless waves of energy instantly enveloped both Yang Yi and Su Fan. Moreover, rays of light flickered while palms flew about from time to time within the waves of energy. Everyone outside the arena had solemn expressions on their faces when they witnessed this scene. They'd thought that Yang Yi wouldn't be able to hold on for long when facing Su Fan, and they'd never imagined that he would actually be able to fight Su Fan without falling into a disadvantaged state. They knew that they'd severely underestimated Yang Ye's strength. Hao Tian nodded slightly. "That kid seems to be not bad." He turned around to gaze at a Nanjing at this point, and he smiled. "But he's far from being able to compare to you." And Nanjing didn't speak, because she knew that it wouldn't take long for them to find out if Yang Yi was strong or not. Hao Tian chuckled, and then he gazed at Han Yu. "Why haven't those old fellows of your devil path arrived?" Han Yu glanced at Hao Tian and said, "Since Senior Hao Tian has taken a liking to her, then the seniors of my devil path naturally have to give Senior Hao Tian some face." "What nonsense!" Hao Tian cursed. "Kid, cut the crap. It's clearly because I was quick. Those old fellows know that it's pointless even if they come. You're giving me face? I won't admit I owe your devil path anything. The corners of Han Yu's mouth twitched, and he laughed dryly and didn't say anything else. Martial ancestral uncle. Meanwhile, Wu Yuan suddenly walked over to Hao Tian and said, "That fellow, Yang Yi, is really not bad. His natural talent in the sword Dao is extraordinary, and his body has been cultivated to an extremely terrifying level. If he joins our martial sect, then he—" "Such nonsense!" Hao Tian interrupted Wu Yuan and said, "His natural talent in the sword Dao is extraordinary? Is it greater than Yi Longxie from Apex City? His cultivation of the body is terrifying? Is it more terrifying than Xianxia from the Builder Sect? Not to mention them, he can't even compare to her. I'm not a benevolent person, and I won't just take anyone." Hao Tian immediately glared at Wu Yuan when he noticed that Wu Yuan intended to continue. "If you want to recruit him, then do it yourself. I don't want my reputation to be spoiled in the future." Wu Yuan laughed bitterly and thought to himself, Yang Ye's sword Dao isn't superior to Yi Longxie, and his body isn't superior to Xianxia. However, Yi Longxie's body isn't as formidable as Yang Ye's, and Xianxia's attainments in the sword Dao aren't as formidable as Yang Yi as well. But he didn't speak these words out loud, because Hao Tian's mind was filled with his excitement from a Nanjing's martial god physique, and he might suffer a beating if he tried to speak further. In the battlefield, sword energy and energy palms were flashing about, and the entire battlefield started to tremble. It was absolutely shocking. At this moment, Su Fan had a solemn expression on his face. He was growing more and more shocked as the battle continued, because he noticed that while Yang Yi was a half-saint, regardless of whether it was combat instinct or Yang Ye's own strength, it had far surpassed his expectations. Especially Yang Ye's body. It was so strong that even he was fearful and annoyed by it, because Yang Yi had completely disregarded his defenses in the battle with him. And every single move Yang Yi made was one where Yang Yi aimed to suffer a blow in order to land one as well. Su Fan was a high-rank saint, so his body was naturally strong as well, but it was absolutely not as strong as Yang Yi, and it wasn't strong enough to disregard Yang Ye's sword energy. So, a dignified high-rank saint like him was actually equally matched in battle against a half-saint. "Are you going to continue making a fool of yourself?" Suddenly, Li Leaguai's voice resounded in the pocket of space. At this moment, Li Leaguai's face was extremely gloomy. He'd made Su Fan fight Yang Yi because he hoped that Su Fan could deal with Yang Yi quickly. So long as Yang Yi was dealt with, then the bad influence this competition had on the law faction would be gone. After all, history was always written by the victor. But he hadn't expected that Su Fan wouldn't just be unable to kill Yang Yi swiftly. Su Fan was actually equally matched in battle with Yang Yi. Yang Yi was a half-saint while Su Fan was a high-rank saint. Moreover, Su Fan was even the strongest expert in the law faction besides him. If news of this were to spread, then it would just be Su Fan who lost face. The entire law faction would lose face as well. Especially at a time like this, the morale of the law faction's forces was waning. If the battle were to drag on, then it would be even more disadvantageous to the law faction's plans. That was why he'd sent a voice transmission into the battlefield to make Su Fan end it quickly. Su Fan's heart shook when he heard Li Leaguai, and he pondered deeply for an instant before slapping his palm forward repeatedly. At the same time that he pushed Yang Yi back, his figure flashed around 300 m back as well. After that, he clenched both his fists tightly. In an instant, a terrifying aura surged out from within it, and it was like a raging torrent that instantly enveloped the entire battlefield. "Yang Yi, I have to admit that you really are not bad. However, you're too young in the end. Now, let's end this with one move." Su Fan's voice resounded through the battlefield, while the aura which surged out from within him was growing stronger and stronger. "You're finally going to go all out?" Yang Yi laughed coldly, and he placed the Herculean sword back into his spatial ring. After that, he started walking slowly towards Su Fan. Meanwhile, the spectators noticed that Yang Ye's figure had actually started to turn red. Bang! A pillar of blood shot up into the air from Yang Yi. In an instant, The entire battlefield was turned blood red while boundless slaughter intent filled it. Moreover, even the spectators outside the arena could sense the monstrous aura of blood within the pocket of space. An emperor-rank sword. Hao Tian frowned and said, "An emperor-rank sword of slaughter. He seems like he's still able to maintain his consciousness. That fellow isn't that bad." Wu Yuan was visibly delighted because if Hao Tian forcefully took Yang Yi into the martial sect, then it would be a great thing for the martial sect. He was just about to speak when Hao Tian added, "But he's still really inferior when compared to my disciple." Wu Yuan was speechless. In the battlefield, Yang Yi held the blood-red sword in his hand while two types of intent shot out from within him, and the imposing aura Su Fan emanated was instantly dispersed by them. Void-rank sword intent and void-rank slaughter intent. A wisp of surprise flashed through Hao Tian's eyes. His sword intent and slaughter intent are both tempered well, and it's especially so for his slaughter intent. Is that fellow from the evil faction? Li Leaguai's face grew even gloomier when he saw those two intents that Yang Yi possessed. It wasn't difficult to comprehend two intents, but it was rare to temper them to such a condensed state. Even if he really wanted to kill that arrogant fellow, Yang Yi, he had to admit that Yang Yi really wasn't bad. Unfortunately, Yang Yi was his enemy, and an enemy naturally deserved death, especially when it was an enemy with extraordinary natural talent. If such an enemy wasn't killed as soon as possible, that enemy might become impossible to kill in the future. A wisp of ferocity surged into Su Fan's eyes when he saw Yang Yi transform into a blood-red figure, and his body floated up slowly. Once he arrived in midair, he raised his right hand slowly. In an instant, the space in an area of 3 kilometers around him actually started to warp. A moment of silence ensued before Su Fan suddenly slapped his right palm down in Yang Ye's direction. "Heaven Smasher!" At the same time that his voice finished resounding, an energy palm flashed out from before him, and then the space in the entire battlefield instantly started to crack apart. Countless cracks covered the entire battlefield, and it was an absolutely shocking sight, an emperor-rank technique. Meanwhile, Yang Yi sheathed the blood-red sword, and then he swiftly drew it right away. OM! Along with a sword howl that resounded through the 9 heavens, a blood-red beam of sword energy that was enhanced by void-rank sword intent and slaughter intent shot up into the air. It was 110 overlapped heaven rens. Space wasn't blasted apart by the blood-red beam of sword energy, but the space before it was torn apart. The reason it had such an effect was because of Yang Ye's control towards his intents. At this moment, regardless of whether it was his control over his strength or sword intent, they'd both far surpassed his past ability. So, the energy within his attack wouldn't leak out at all. That was exactly why his sword energy was even more terrifying. The spectators watched as the blood-red beam of sword energy collided against the huge palm. However, it merely stopped for an instant before it slashed the palm apart and slammed against Su Fan, who was stunned by the sight of his attack being destroyed with such ease. Bang! Su Fan's figure was blasted flying. Countless strands of blood surged out from him as he flew, and they transformed into torrents of blood that surged into the blood-red sword in Yang Ye's grasp. Su Fan had lost. Everyone here was stunned. "Stop!" Li Leaguai roared furiously when he saw Su Fan's blood flowing out incessantly, and he was about to attack. Meanwhile, a ray of blood-red sword energy tore through the air in the battlefield, and then it shot through Su Fan. Su Fan's body instantly sliced into 2, and countless strands of blood sprayed out from him and surged into the blood-red sword in Yang Ye's grasp. As for Su Fan, he was dead. "You're courting death." A ferocious expression instantly appeared on Li Leaguai's face when he saw Yang Yi disregard him, and then his figure flashed and instantly appeared within the battlefield before shooting towards Yang Yi.